Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Tonight, we're going to be discussing some hot topics of the week, but first, we are going to do a little bit more of a long form tribute and remembrance of John MacArthur, a little bit more of a conversation on life and legacy, mostly the legacy and, what might happen next. And, I laid out some bold predictions in the last video that I did when I reported on John MacArthur's death, but I did want to expand on that. I wanted to kind of get Anthony's opinion on that because he's probably read more John MacArthur than I have. So wanted to get his take on the whole situation, just his thoughts on this as well. Since I think you've always had a more positive opinion of John MacArthur than me. And, mine's grown more positive over time, but still.
I mean, I certainly have enjoyed the study Bible he has. That's been very good, very helpful. And even where I disagree with some of the theology, because I will say it probably did convince me against premillennial dispensation, because I didn't quite find the notes compatible with the text oftentimes. But he did open my eyes to certain views on other issues. He did help me out on various articles I've written, including the David and Absalom. His commentary on what will be Second Samuel, I thought was very helpful in describing that issue. But
All
yeah, I
right.
mean, as far as like his issues, his takes on tithing, or his takes on like this the Sabbath. I mean, again, I might disagree with him on those things, but at the same time, he does at least present the steel man arguments for whatever his theological arguments are. Even his premillennial dispensation or his like leaky premill is actually well articulated, even if I disagree. So he is a good expositor of scripture, even in dissent.
All right. Those are very kind words for sure. I just think back on like some of his best moments, telling Beth Moore to go home in 2019. I think it was 2019. Like he was so real for that because the world, evangelicalism was like very late to catch on to Beth Moore, in my opinion. I mean, she definitely went woke after the 2016 election. That seems to be what, or not, she didn't go woke then, but that's definitely when people caught on to her was the 2016 election onward. So he was still at the end of the day an early adopter for calling her out among Big Eva elites. And John MacArthur was in Big Eva. Yeah, I mean, and he was an elite. Now again, I'm just talking about when I say he was Big Eva, I'm talking about his market share because the guy was pretty much part of a triumvirate, and he was the only, in my opinion, positive contributor to the triumvirate because the triumvirate was for a while there. After R.C. Sproul died, it was Tim Keller, John Piper, and John MacArthur. Like that was a triumvirate going on in Reformed evangelicalism, and now Keller's dead, so it's just John MacArthur and John Piper. But I think it's not like Caesar outlives Pompey and he's therefore dictator. That's not going to happen with John Piper. But is that making sense that he was basically part of like an evangelical triumvirate, at
I mean,
least reformed evangelical triumvirate?
he was one of the big names,
Yeah.
probably the biggest as far as like reputation, reach, even just positive perception. I mean, obviously, Desiring God is pretty big. It's even bigger than like Gospel Coalition, and it's probably like the biggest online source, I think.
Desiring God is, yeah, like even bigger than the Gospel Coalition. Yeah. The only thing really bigger than that is Got Questions Ministries.
But yeah, that's all search engine traffic anyway.
Yeah, it is. It's not the people behind that are big. So, but John MacArthur, I mean, I think is like if you were right wing, he was basically the largest pastor in terms of market share. Now, he might have had like say 20% and the next person had 18%. But you know what I'm saying? Like he had probably the largest audience among decidedly right-wing Christians. People who are more politically awake. And I think John Piper, a lot of liberals must like him. I think John Piper is a liberal politically. And then Tim Keller was a liberal, obviously. So, yeah, John MacArthur had appeal because he was not liberal politically. I mean, I don't think he was great on politics all his life, but he wasn't nearly as bad. Like he was way above the average when it came to pastors.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it did show because considering what he was able to grow Grace Community Church into. Obviously, again, his study Bible speaks for itself as being very popular. Because you'll have again, it is one of the more popular study Bibles out there, and it generally has a good reputation for a good reason.
Yeah. And I saw some criticism in the comment section for John MacArthur, like, and some of it I just don't think is legitimate. Like, I don't think ghostwriting books is wrong or sinful. For instance, because a lot of his books are probably sermons that he's delivered that got adapted into a book. So
Isn't
it's
that
not
what?
like he
Isn't that
didn't
what
do
Phil
the work.
Johnson? Isn't that what Phil Johnson did? It was like he would be like the guy that would edit it, and
I don't know who did it. I'm just saying, like, okay, the idea that John MacArthur had sermons adapted into books, I don't think is wrong. And
I mean, it's
if we want to call
certainly
that ghostwriting, I don't think that's wrong. And I don't think another charge was nepotism, which I also don't think you can make a biblical case that nepotism is a sin. It in and of itself is a sin.
I mean, it's a very hard case to make that it even would be.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
get,
the father passes something on to his son, which John MacArthur was the son of a pastor. So, oh, that's also an interesting actually, and then a lot of the feminists are really latching on to the Eileen Gray situation, which I don't see how you can say MacArthur did anything wrong with the information that he had at the time that he had it and
yeah.
acted on it.
I mean, you're
They've
trying to
never made
play
they've never played a
hindsight.
yeah.
You're trying to play hindsight 2020 and say, yeah, you should have known this at the time, and you sent her back to her abusive husband, which and then of course you have therapy driven claims of sexual abuse, which those can be very dubious if you realize that psychologists can actually implant memories into people that are susceptible.
My children. But and the whole repressed memories is extremely controversial, even among psychologists who are already very left leaning. Like, even among them, they don't really buy repressed memories. It's more of a Hollywood trope at this point. So, yeah, it seems to be like the biggest thing they have. And some people say, oh, he was rich. Well, the guy was preaching, he had multiple streams of income and did that for like 50 years and had real estate in Southern California that appreciated a lot in value. Of course, he was on paper going to be a millionaire. I don't know how much cash he had, but yeah, I don't think being rich is a sin. But anyway, those are what people really didn't like about him. Just, I don't think it was, I don't think, first of all, I don't think that's enough to call him a false teacher. And that's not even getting into more doctrinal disagreements. Obviously, people don't like the whole lordship salvation thing, which I just think lordship salvation is, which John MacArthur was pretty instrumental in that fight. I guess Steve Lawson was also instrumental in that fight too. That was like one of the only fights he was instrumental in, it seems. But John MacArthur was pretty instrumental in that fight, but Lordship Salvation is basically just a new name for what Christians have always believed about the role of repentance in salvation and sanctification and being saved in general. Like, the
Yeah, I mean,
unrepentant aren't saved.
yeah, I mean, knowledge, trust, and assent. I mean, those are the three components of faith. But we're just putting new words and new language on it. Which again, of all the new terms that have arisen that are novel, I mean, that's
That's like the
hardly
most
that's yeah, it's
benign.
benign.
Yeah, like, think of how, unconditional love, which, again, that's a new term that's been invented. The over the huge stress on the term imago Dei, it's relatively new. Uh,
Here's one: orthocardis,
what is
which means
that?
like the right heart.
Right. Oh,
Orthodoxy of
okay.
the heart. It's just like that's not historic.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, lordship salvation, really, like, that's like the most benign thing that's come up. The use of saying love your neighbor without the condition of as yourself, which by the way is conditional love.
Or judge not.
Judge not. Yep. If you want to be Chip and Joanna Gaines, which we'll get to more in the second part of this live stream. Uh, so yeah, I think John MacArthur, he was in on a lot of fights. I do believe he was in on the inerrancy controversy of like old school theological liberalism. He was in on that fight. He didn't he did not bend the knee on the issue of homosexuality in the church, and can't really say that about John. I don't think you can really say that about John Piper. You definitely can't say that about Tim Keller, who arguably was one of the godfathers of side B theology that teaches that homosexual attraction and desires and identity aren't sinful. Like that came from, as far as I can tell, the Gospel Coalition was the first organization that peddled that theology,
Even
and
before Christianity Today.
yeah, even before Christianity Today. Because I don't know when they went gay affirming, but yeah, I mean, Gospel Coalition, they, as far as I can tell, invented side B theology. And then, John MacArthur also called out Tim Keller, which, again, he called out other big guys, and that's very rare. You do not see, you don't see John Piper calling out anything that's
You're
actually
in it.
a meaningful threat to the church these days.
Yeah, there's a reason the whole 11th commandment is a thing in Southern Baptist circles: if thou shalt not speak ill of another Southern Baptist. And John MacArthur has always addressed issues that have been brought for him, and he's not shied away. He's called out Tony Evans. Obviously, he did address the Steve Lawson stuff at the time.
Yeah, I mean, there is a quote of John MacArthur that talked about him not going after a friend or something like that, and to some degree, it does hold up. Like he did not call out John Piper or Ligon Duncan for their wokeness. And I do think that was a little bit of a blind spot. He did, there was the whole thing with Alistair Begg, that, that story that we broke a year ago. And John MacArthur did play a role in that. They canceled Alistair Begg from their conference. Like, whoa. So that was, he might have had that famous quote, which I think is like from before 2019. So it's even older than the whole Beth Moore go home thing, which it almost seems like they scrubbed that video from the internet, like the original like clip. But in any case, he was more willing to go after large figures in evangelicalism, specifically ones that aren't like on the reservation, the hunting reservation. Like Joel Osteen is on the hunting reservation for every evangelical leader to use as a punching bag. Like he is like on the reserve. You can hunt this. You can go after this. He's on the reserve. He's on the hunting reserve.
There's entire channels that are kind of like dedicated to taking out the low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Osteen being one of them, or going after hyper charismatic cringe, which again MacArthur's done his fair share of. Which in his lifetime, that was a huge issue because he was presumably born. I won't say. He's not even that old, but obviously,
yeah. Right?
So it was already underway for, let's say, 39 years prior to that. I forget when exactly like Azusa happened, but yeah, his lifetime saw the ascendancy of the charismatic movement, the rise of televangelism as a thing. Obviously, easy believism with a lot of like the Billy Graham style of evangelism. So he saw that during his lifetime, and obviously his ministry reflects that naturally of addressing the issues that were pertinent during his lifetime.
Yeah, and I think he was wrong on Romans 13 and stuff like that. That was like one issue in his lifetime that I don't think he was very right on, but he got better on that issue, which was kind of interesting to watch. And it's good that you bring up a lot of the context. Like even you might say, like, I have wondered how much of his views on eschatology have changed over time, because I've definitely heard like some older clips of him preaching, and it's like I'm not really sure how he's much different than, say, the other dispensationalist preacher, the one that's gulping down the Hal Lindsey.
If you go way back, you'll see him basically preach a very imminent return of Christ. as if at the time, at least, obviously, he probably might have believed at the time that the 70-year clock had started with Israel, considering, again, his lifetime saw the creation of a certain Middle Eastern democracy.
Right. So I always wondered, when did his views on eschatology change over time, like the emergence of his so-called leaky dispensationalism. Like, I've always kind of wondered that. And I've tried to look into that, but I didn't really find anything. Like, I don't know if no one's really written a scholarly paper that I can tell of, John MacArthur's changes in theology, or really, something I would read, like a shorter form website or article or whatever. But I don't know if you have any insight on that, because
I assume
you've seen the
he's
same thing I've seen, that he had a lot more uh he, he had a lot more or a lot less distinct views, say 30-40 years ago.
I assume he is certainly softened on that, because I would not have imagined him, having, I won't say very imminent return of Christ expectation in his preaching. Not saying that you shouldn't have vigilance, but obviously the expectation that would happen during his lifetime, which would be very much of the time, because of the whole Daniel 70 weeks equals 70 years from 1949 or whatever year we want to choose. So I assume he's softened on that, and that would probably have became leaky dispensationalism,
Okay.
which I would assume does not necessarily predicate itself on this iteration of modern Israel. Because I think I've heard that view espoused, and it's not that leaky dispensational doesn't necessarily mean this version.
Right. That I've heard, and that might be like the biggest distinction. So yeah, it's just very interesting. Like, even people that I know definitely mentioned the death of John MacArthur this week, and I don't like talk to them about any evangelical story that goes on. But they brought this up, and it's like, yeah, it's a huge deal. This to me is like the second biggest story of the year as far as Christian news goes.
What specifically? Just
John
this?
MacArthur's death, I
No.
think, is the second biggest story of the year so far. The first one being a new pope. Like, that's kind of an automatic one in any year.
I mean, but I won't say neither of which were shocking, because
What? Oh,
obviously MacArthur had surgeries, like reported surgeries before, and again the Pope the same thing. So I mean, it's not like these are sudden deaths or sudden losses or unexpected losses, but they were both men at the end of their natural life stage.
yeah, and it's kind of interesting because, like, indeed, both of them, they had a health scare, then they recovered from that, and then they just quickly fell back into it. And yeah, it's pretty sad how that happens. So yeah, people get old. Just and it kind of, I think it was Boniface option, Andrew Isker, who brought up the idea that, hey, you can't just using the government to prolong people's lives is, just as selfish as, demanding entitlements and stuff. Yeah, he brought up that point about, like, things like Social Security and
It
Medicare and
is
stuff.
a very like cogent argument when you realize it's like we're talking like $150,000, not like 20,000 here or there, but 150,000. That's more than like most. That's like double the average annual salary of an American.
Hmm. That what
Of
is?
just like last, I think it's like last year medical expenses.
Oh, wow.
So when you're talking about these massive medical bills at the end of life, that's a huge like expense. And then again, the efficacy of these treatments might not even be very sound. And again, you can't escape death. It is, it comes for us all.
Right.
It's like taxes and so forth. Like, so there's no escaping it. There's, and that's kind of what Isker was getting into, that a lot of people hated on, but it's funny. They cry about government spending, but they'll target a guy for complaining about massive government spending.
Right. And John MacArthur, he was not, he was very resigned to his fate. Like when he did that video a few months ago, like that was a very touching video that he gave. It was relatable to all ages, and uh, he was he was prepared. He was resigned to his fate, and I certainly want to go out like that. Uh, so and this is something that shouldn't be rare, is for a big pastor to finish well. Like, obviously, I don't think, like, even people that that I know that are more fans of Tim Keller than me, like, because I think Tim Keller's a false teacher. Yeah, they don't think that Tim Keller finished well.
No, a lot of people don't even know because I mean, maybe they just they're obviously we have the receipts. We do a lot of the cataloging of such things. Other people do it too. I know John Harris did the whole. I mean,
Tucker Carlson called him out. John
he did the whole
MacArthur called him out.
on
Yeah.
like Keller and how it's just like from I mean, once like Genesis to Revelation, he's kind of like wrong on every major issue facing the church. Again,
Right.
beginning with creation, and I think ending with some. He might have even been compromised on the whole eternal state.
Yeah, well, because he believed that hell was like, you lock yourself in prison.
Well, I think it's deeper than that, but obviously his series on that, it's been a couple of years, and someone had actually cataloged it all. But yeah, a lot of
Right.
people, again, before the advent of the internet, their exposure to Tim Keller might have been through various books. And I hear his book on marriage is
Gospel
actually,
Coalition.
yeah, but I hear his book on marriage was actually good.
Yeah,
So
I'm familiar with his book on marriage. Like, he calls Genesis poetry in marriage, in the book on marriage, but maybe that and something
I mean,
more nuance was like the only red flags in that book.
I
But
hear there
like
was a lack of
he calls
emphasis.
Genesis poetry in marriage, in his book on marriage, which I thought was very cringe because it was not poetry.
Well, I hear he lacked an emphasis on child rearing in his marriage book or
No, he told a
procreation.
story about how he refused to. I believe he told a story about how he refused to change diapers or something like that. There's something on that,
Well,
but
I mean, like a procreation as an expectation of marriage. I think I heard
okay.
that was a criticism of this book, but that's sight unseen.
I don't remember his book that much.
But
It's been
meanwhile, if we go
years.
back to John MacArthur, one of the clips from way back that you actually played on the channel was like him roasting some guy asking about the whole marriage crisis.
And can you go into a little bit more detail
Um,
to jog my memory?
it was basically, I guess a guy asked him how to like, advice on like dating in the modern environment. And, obviously he was unprepared for the question. And obviously a man of his age was a little bit outside the dating market by a couple decades, but
More than a couple, but yeah.
yeah, more than a couple. But yeah, it was just a good moment, even though he was like kind of caught off guard by the questioner. And
You
yeah,
remember? Yeah.
I'm not going to go out and say that his answer was great and all, but yeah, because that was the one where he did that. Just I wish it was like a butcher shop and you could just take a number and just like randomly like assign people dates. So I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, he's like talking about like arranging dates and stuff like that,
yes,
and
yes.
how parents should help arrange dates for their children, or more assistance from elder, people in the church to help matchmake. Okay, this is starting to come back to me, but yeah, I mean, he was not afraid to answer questions because he obviously did a lot of Q&As.
And again, even on that question, he didn't necessarily act like he had the answer to a question he didn't quite have the answer to.
Yeah, and that's a hard question to throw at someone, but my understanding is that John MacArthur, always stood to get his hand shaken by people after the services that he, the sermons that he preached. He would be available to shake hands and meet people, which a lot of pastors aren't like that. Uh, I think of Steve Dace at the Right Response Conference, not like that at all. He was out, straight to Bucky's. But John MacArthur was all about shaking, shook hands, met people, and very classy guy. Even from people that have disagreed with him, they all say that. They say that about him. Now, what's interesting is that even Mark Driscoll, I'm sure him and MacArthur have had their they've had some spats over the years or whatever, but bygones were bygones by the time of his death. Because I don't think Mark Driscoll could actually call out more people, but he doesn't. But he calls out a lot of things though. But it's kind of interesting that bygones became bygones with Driscoll and MacArthur, and they both endorsed Shepherds for Sale too.
And MacArthur having notoriously gone against charismatics, and Driscoll's stance on that is increasingly more charismatic
and increasingly very anti-cessationist. But although he talks about the way he talks about cessationism is more hyper cessationism than like
basic continuationism.
Well, because Driscoll defines cessationism as like not believing in any supernatural acts happening today at all and stuff like that. Where I think the issue is, whether it's the people that are gifted with certain things, not whether these, faith healing happens, but are people gifted with faith healing? Prophecy, I think, happens, but are people specifically gifted with that? Like that should be where the debate is. Whether people are specifically gifted with things like even tongues, which I'm not sure actually happens these days. But, are people gifted with that?
No, I mean,
I'm sure some of us and some of people in the audience might be familiar with. They might know of someone in their local church that has a secret prayer language. I've definitely heard of that in a local church context multiple times. So I don't know if you're going to add to that.
I mean, the other part of it that's weird, and I don't see it as brought up in the whole continuation debate, is just that the Pentecostals actually asserted that the gifts reemerged. So that's so they actually do assert a cessation of gifts, and then the gifts reemerge. It's all kind of funny.
Oh, really?
But yes, well, that's why they're called Pentecostals. They assert that this was the second Pentecost.
Oh, okay.
Which means a reemergence of the sign gifts, which again had eschatological significance in its reemergence. Obviously, that kind of stuff goes away,
and it becomes like a forgotten lore of their history and movement.
A lot of things in charismaticism became forgotten lore,
right? So
just like Anabaptism.
Yes, they just pretend like Munster never happened and act like they're the victims. Like that's Anabaptism for you. So with that said, I posited that John MacArthur would not have a successor, and that I don't, a lot of people have been jockeying to be his successor. Some people thought Steve Lawson would be his successor. Josh Bice, I think, thought he would be the successor. And maybe some other people in Medieval thought that, they were going to be that guy, but they have not been that guy. And I don't think anyone's going to be that guy. I want to get your take on whether, does John MacArthur have a successor?
I don't think he really can.
And I'm not talking about the local church context.
I don't think on like a national scale he actually can, because I think the media landscape is very much fragmented to where a big name cannot just emerge overnight or just be called on to be a successor. Like you can't really pass the torch, so to speak, on like a national stage. It just doesn't work. And again, he became big because he was played on the radio. So you had people, that radio is kind of a dying medium. Streaming and internet are the big thing. Obviously, the current currency right now is authenticity. So pastors that are perceived to be authentic are the ones that are going to rise to prominence. But at the same time, it will probably be a very monopolistic field, which is probably ideal. Like I think
What do you mean monopolistic, or do you mean democratized?
Monopolistic meaning like, it's kind of referring to industries where, there's no one with a unique economic advantage, but like every coffee shop is, it's kind of monopolistic industry as opposed to.
I keep thinking monopoly.
Going Econ 101, but
I took Econ 101 and probably 102, and I don't know that term off the top of my head.
But yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see, I won't say more hyper localization maybe on like regional pastors. Obviously, you're seeing that kind of already with Moscow having its reputation, Refuge Church having theirs, obviously Apologia,
Georgetown.
Georgetown, Texas. So I think you're seeing that currently. That's probably going to be what replaces it. It will be, and again, when one person dies, they're succeeded by someone else just kind of fills the void. So,
Yeah, and
and that's just the landscape of the
there.
internet because there is no water cooler TV shows anymore. So again, this affects all culture. There's no water cooler TV shows.
Yeah, I know.
There's like even sports is becoming more supplanted by gambling rather than like loyalty to the local team.
Because the local team's not loyal to their own fan base, so it erodes both directions. But and you're talking about lack of water cooler. I'll just say water cooler fill in the blank because you're definitely right about
Yes.
TV shows. Because Stranger Things can't do it because it's first of all super overrated. Second of all, they've had 5 seasons over the course of 9 years, so it's not. That's not you failed to come out with
Even if
content to
we,
be a water cooler. So if even TV shows can't even do that, like
yes. So how can a pastor? Yeah, exactly.
how
Like
can
that
pastors get on that level?
that era is gone. And
Yeah, I
again,
think it's gone.
televangelism is also going to die too, which that's actually a very good thing. Like, I mean, I don't know what the long term value of Daystar TV is, but Fox News has better odds than they do.
I mean, their saving grace is not the Lord, but it might be the fact that they can still make money in overseas markets.
Yeah, I mean, TBN, a lot of these other,
Benny Hinn can make a lot of money going to Africa.
yeah, and there's a reason they're probably doing that too, which,
Yeah, I mean, can they still keep doing it here? So, uh, okay, so I think we're in agreement on that take because I don't. Maybe in the next 10 years, the largest pastors will probably be, dare I say, David Platt might be one of them. But I think that documentary successfully kneecapped him. So maybe it's not David Platt. I do think Joel Webbin is in the conversation, even if he doesn't have the largest church. As far as like his internet presence and platform goes, the guy has over 120,000 YouTube subs. I think that's actually more important than how many butts you have in a seat in your church uh, currently, because Joel Osteen had the most butts in his seats, and then the multi-campus model emerged.
I mean, ironically, you probably still have James White for another 10 plus years. You probably obviously Doug Wilson.
His YouTube channel is not exactly healthy. Like his platform's not healthy. Like I don't think his channel even does the numbers. So I don't see that being the case. And a debater, a debating apologist is not the same. So I don't think that'll
Which
be the
again,
same.
ironically, a lot of people are like doing that. Again, I think debate me bro culture is dead. It's been dead.
Well,
But
2020 killed that,
I mean,
my opinion.
but yeah, as far as like who's in the wings, I mean, obviously, again, you still will have like a Doug Wilson, maybe Virgil Walker stepping away from G3 and doing his own thing at the local church will elevate him a little bit. So he'll actually maybe get a little bit of a bump outside of G3 and almost in spite of in spite of leaving G3. That's a possibility.
You think Scott Annual, his long overdue promotion at G3 is gonna do
No, I mean
anything?
that's like saying, yeah, we had a major scandal, but no new sheriff in town, and so that's not going to help anyone. Which that's not probably not going to help G3 long term.
I mean, they coincidentally announced that this week. Uh, sure took their time in doing that if it was long overdue. But anyway, uh, yeah, a lot of people have been jockeying for John MacArthur's market share, and I don't think any of them are going to get it. And I just think that's funny. That's funny to me that all these people have been, like vultures circling him, but none of them are going to get it. So I like to see that. I think the people who are building their own platforms will eventually get large enough. Maybe they're not going to be as big because I think it's going to be a different era. There's not going to be a water cooler pastor in our circles these days, but you never know because maybe 15 years from now, social media is a relic of a bygone era. So you never know what the future is going to entail, especially if we can't gatekeep, say, certain cultures from social media. That could kill social media.
No,
But
that's why
anyway,
you're going to see more of a hyper localization of social media too. That's in the land. That's in probably it. I won't say in the works, but that we are kind of trending in that direction. That's why group chats are a bigger deal. Telegram, Signal. I mean, I wouldn't trust Discord if I were you, but
yeah, I
But
wouldn't.
yeah, see hyper localization being a big deal, and if Elon Musk really wants to make Twitter profitable, have an international firewall.
Yeah, I don't know if that'll make it more profitable, but it would certainly help with the a lot of the cringe content that he floats up there. But yeah, Elon's crashing out on multiple issues. So I think that's any final thoughts regarding John MacArthur.
No, he was a great pastor, one of the greats of his era, and he ran the race and finished it well. And again,
Yeah,
especially after 2024, where you saw a lot of people not finish the race well, it's good to know that someone did,
for
and we
sure.
should take that as encouragement.
All right, let's switch gears to a topic that you want to get me in trouble on. So you wrote an article on Megan Basham, who is a friend of the channel, follows the Evangelical Dark Web on the Twitter sphere, which you should as well. So with that said, let me just preface by saying, generally, like her work, she's downstream from a lot of the stuff that we do here. So when uh, so her success is not us getting the credit, but it is our work having fruit that we don't exactly reap the rewards of, but nonetheless, God does credit the little guy for what downstream from us has larger impact. So Megan Basham is, her transformation and emergence is actually a credit to the success of the little discernment bloggers uh, like me or John Harris, AD Robles, and stuff like that. So, uh, so I'm generally very favorable to her and her presence. That being said, she had a very horrendous take this week on Spencer Claven, defending Spencer Claven, and you wrote an article on that. So I'll give the floor to you now that I've given my disclaimer, because that was a horrendous take and it needs to get called out because it is no different than Chip and Joanna Gaines saying that it was no different than what they did.
Yeah, because I mean, and again, for the record, I actually did, make the same disclaimer in the article. It's just like, she's been useful at bringing issues in American Protestantism to a larger audience. That's kind of been why she has been very helpful, very useful. And again, on one hand, she was highlighting the role of degeneracy on Chip and Joanna Gaines' show, even highlighting the fact that was it Jack Baller? Let me actually make sure I pull up the name. Yeah, Billy Jack Bronner, who had like a devil's threesome in his marriage bed. And
That's
she
just so
exposed that, and that
nasty.
guy's like the cameraman or something that does work for Magnolia Studios. And again, so he's not the gay guy or the gay couple that they had on the show. He's someone that works for them. And I'm sure. And when you say that Spencer Claven's this kind, brilliant man, I love him, and you're endorsing both his character and his work, that is fundamentally no different than what the Chip and Joanna Gaines do with the gay guy under their staff. That's not actually any different than what the Chosen did with their Pride Flag scenario, where we like his work. We will tolerate this on our set.
Yeah, I
And
mean the Chosen, that's never been allowed on the set of the Chosen, but I don't know if there's any Christians on the set of the Chosen. Like it's
no,
very
true. But the idea being, you don't like it's fundamentally no different because again, you're making exceptions for people that you know. And she's endorsing his character again. I don't think he has any character. He
I don't think
twists.
he has any good writing either, but
Yeah, I read the article that Andrew Claven promoted, which someone's just like, hey, why do we listen to? Oh, your son has sex with men. Why do I care what he writes?
and you read the article, and what was it even about? Like something about innocence to
It had to do with like dinosaurs. It was kind of like doing like I won't say a horseshoe theory on like dinosaurs, where it's just like dinosaurs were dragons in the Middle Ages, and then turns out they were dragons. Now, like we're coming to that conclusion with modern science. So it's like, oh, you can discover Genesis through like Genesis kind of affirms, gives you like a connect, like science and Genesis give you like a connection between like the simple man. Again, it's such like fluff piece, like nonsense drivel. I mean, it's not like a long article, but
it's
it's
not a
like
terrible
it's
take,
nothing
but it's not
special.
original. Yeah, it's not original.
It's
Like
nothing.
haunted cosmos exists. I was actually talking with some guys at church the other day about dragons and dinosaurs and stuff like that. We got some reptile enthusiasts. So
But yeah, I mean, it was nothing special, nothing worthy of praise, and nothing really worthy of promotion at all. It's just like, really, this is the article you want to defend. This is the writer that you want to defend his character. And again, I don't think he has character. Spencer Claven is notorious for twisting Christianity to defend his sodomy.
and he
That's what
also
he
runs a
does.
podcast called Young Heretics.
Yes.
So he openly affirms, like, he openly embraces the term that he's a heretic. Ironically, like evangelical dark web's, technically using a pejorative against the user. So he's doing the same thing, except, for evil. And honestly, like, I think it's inevitable that he's going to go and him and his, you know, his,
But buddy,
that guy is,
who works for the Daily Wire. His name is Joshua Hare. He's the general counsel for the Daily Wire. So it's like, okay, you got two people in your sphere.
yeah,
You know,
they couldn't find a Jewish lawyer.
he might actually be, but I didn't check in early life.
Yeah, I didn't do. I'm just saying, like, I think Ben Shapiro would know some people, right? But
Yeah.
anyway,
So
because
it's like,
he used to be one of those people. But what I think is fascinating is that, or what I think is inevitable is that they're going to go and get some kids. They're going to get some boys. I
yeah,
think
I
that's
mean,
inevitable.
50-50 odds. And again, is she going to,
50-50. Like, it's at least
but is she going to,
75%. They're definitely going to do what Dave Rubin did, what Guy Benson did, what Pete Buttigieg did. Am I missing anyone else?
I mean, those are probably the major three. I mean, I'm sure we can find others, but yeah, I mean, but
They're going to
again,
do that. Would lay money on that, but I think the odds are so high, no bookie would ever make that bet.
and again, we kind of go through again. Nothing that this wonderful troll was doing was like anything unique or just like not even or even specific to Spencer Claven. Like people will do that to Rob Smith, who's the token black guy. That you
Used to be
know,
on TPUSA and
yes,
then
and guess what?
left MAGA.
That was the guy who started the Groiper, or that was like the centerpiece of the Groiper War, where Charlie Kirk is asked how does anal sex win the culture war, and that was in reference to Rob Smith on the stage.
Yep.
And Charlie Kirk defending Charlie Kirk defending Rob Smith. And guess what? He got roasted by that. And years later, Christian channels were talking about that specific clip. That's a 2019 clip, and you had channels talking about it years later, years after the fact, even after Charlie Kirk's tune had kind of changed a little bit, and he had kind of gone back to the right on certain issues. But you had Christians having no qualms calling it out years ago. Hey, why is TPUSA working with gay people? Why is this part of the conservative movement? This is unacceptable.
It's like,
So why did Spencer?
thank you for waking up to the fight, because 2019, I remember those fights, I remember those clips. Not really a fan of Nick Fuentes, never really went down that rabbit hole or got into that, but I certainly thought that they were right. Like, they were absolutely right for calling this out. They're right that certain behavior should not be tolerated in the right wing, let's just say conservative wing. There's two things that they should not tolerate, and if you're any one of these two things, you should have zero career prospect in the industry. One is homosexuality, that you should just have zero prospect. The other is you used to do porn. That should be an automatic, you're blacklisted from doing conservative ink.
That said, you're getting into the U.S. Congress. But
Yes.
but yeah, I mean, again, nothing that was targeted at Spencer Claven was unique to Spencer Claven. Like, no, we don't want this in our movement. And here you are again making an exception because you know the guy. And I'm sure a lot of people would do the same thing with Dave Rubin. They do the same thing with Guy Benson, who just trafficked children into his home. They do the same.
And that guy was never conservative either. Like Guy Benson was always pro-abortion, and he claims to be a Christian. And that's actually the worst thing here. Like Chip and Joanna Gaines claim to be Christian. They're not. They clearly apostatize. Andrew Claven claimed to be a Christian. He's clearly not. He's apostatized over this issue.
No, probably others, but
Yeah, probably not the only issue, but usually it's not the only issue, but it is. It's that. It's when you get penetrated. I'm trying to use a military analogy. You're getting enveloped on this issue. Like this issue is causing you to fold on every other issue. You're getting enveloped, or the blitzkrieg has penetrated your line, and now you're just collapsing. So that's basically what homosexuality is. It's one of the stepping stones that causes people to compromise.
and again, Megan Basham saying for those asking for an example, the same-sex attracted person writes an essay unrelated to their sexuality, and someone comes along and says this, which is the Philip quote I just made. What is the point of this? The point of this is that this should not be tolerated at all.
Yeah, especially under the guise of trying to make Christian argumentation.
Or just like the idea of you want to do conservative movement, you want to be fighting the culture war, which again, Daily Wire pretty much, that's kind of their whole thing.
That's how they got big.
Yeah.
That and clickbait. I don't want to say clickbait because that was more of a
Ben
BuzzFeed
Shapiro
thing.
owns videos.
Yeah. Owning the lib. There we go. Owning the lib, click content.
But instead, you're basically becoming them.
Slowly and steadily over time, for sure.
But again, I'm
Matt
sure
Walsh is the anchor keeping the ship from completely going down the black hole.
But I'm sure everyone makes exceptions for the people that they know, but you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, Basham wanted to do the whole,
love this, hate the sin,
hate the sin,
hate the sinner.
I typed that wrong in the article, unironically, but yeah, that cliche doesn't actually work because at the end of the day, you're talking about people that fundamentally identify with their sin. So therefore, you cannot hate the sin without hating them. And that's how they perceive it. Again, we're not talking about what is or is not true or what is or is not logical. They perceive hatred of their sin as hatred of them as a person.
Well, because it's also a religion to them. So, Spencer Claven, his religion is actually homosexuality. That's his religion. Because if you don't think it's a religion, you're like, what happens if you try to leave? I mean, there might be less stigma for that now than, say, a couple of years ago. But, yeah, I mean, what happened to all those detransitioners and stuff like that? Basic, at least with the leaving the homosexuality thing is like they're basically told, no, you're still this, you're still that. And obviously, they don't believe in people can get changed. And that's the same thing with the Side B movement. They don't think that people can get changed either. But, hate the sin, love the sinner. There is an element where if you wanted, you can make a biblical argument from that statement. But the people who use that statement often are not doing that.
Yeah, again, the problem isn't necessarily the words as they're written in the English language and what they have literal meanings. Because I saw someone just like, oh, look, Calvin said the same thing. It sounds like, love the sin.
John MacArthur said the same thing with Megan Basham's argument.
Again, everything comes down to context and application. This phrase is being used for applications that no prior generation of Christian would have ever considered. And before we want to talk about what, St. Augustine may or may not have said on this issue and that, oh, this phrase sounds Augustinian. Like St. Augustine, proudly declared that, or proudly affirmed the Roman mistreatment of theater kids because he affirms the fact that they should have been denaturalized, which means not to have been made citizens. That if you were a thespian in Roman society, you were not allowed to be a citizen. That's how dishonorable that profession was, which should give you some context when, Christ is talking about hypocrites.
Yes. I was
He's also
gonna
talking
say
about
that.
homosexuals,
Talking about theater
which,
kids.
believe it or not, you know, theater kids in the first century had a reputation for, certain degeneracies too. Like some things just never change.
Yeah, it's actually kind of a myth that Roman culture tolerated certain sins.
Well,
They might have existed, and and might have been even prevalent, but they weren't exactly considered. They weren't considered honorable, ideal, or you. It was a scandal if, say, you were a high up person doing that stuff.
like that in particular, you could not do and like retain your honor as a. But again, Romans are very weird because they distinguish religiosity and virtue.
Which is also actually why Alexander the Great was probably not actually gay, but because the Romans, they would have they would have made that a mark on his character when they're writing the history of because some of the there's a bunch of major historians who catalog the adventures of Alexander the Great. Um, some of them are Roman. They would have denounced that.
But again, it all does come down to the application because again, that's probably the mantra of which Alistair Begg gave his advice. And again, I would say that the Bible is resoundingly clear that you're in that situation, you should have no association with a family member that goes off in that sort of direction. And yeah, I would say it's every example in the Bible is resoundingly clear. You have the fact that Leviticus 18, it says to cut off from your people any who do such things, and it's talking about those sins.
Then Leviticus 20 is a death penalty.
Yes. So you have that. Obviously, Paul in First Corinthians talks about excommunication. But when you look at
Paul in Romans 1 talks about death penalty again.
But yeah, you have when you look at the human family was the first church and it was the first state. The government is an outgrowth of the fifth commandment. And the church also started off as patriarchal priesthood, with Abraham being the father and high priest of his church during his era. That's how the church started. So I mean, yes. So the spheres of authority kind of collide on this.
Is it nepotism when the only the Aaron's sons can be the high priest and stuff like that? Is that nepotism? Going back to the criticisms of John MacArthur, right? He practiced nepotism, like so does God, or so did God commanded Aaron to practice nepotism.
Well, I mean, yeah,
but it was also more based in duty than oft times is now, to the credit of the people who are not nepo babies. I'm not a nepo baby, but still.
But yeah, you have to consider the fact that the Bible has very strong standards when it comes to how families tolerate sin within their families. And that's why it is, you can call it excommunication, you can call it disowning, you can call it disfellowshipping, call it whatever you want to call it. You're commanded to kind of do it in these sorts of situations, and not give them go to their wedding and give them a gift. Not.
And you said that John MacArthur helped you come to that conclusion.
Yes, because his commentary on First Samuel or Second Samuel, when Absalom returns to Jerusalem and David does not see him for 2 years, he basically writes that David demonstrated great restraint in not seeing him. He's commending David's character for doing that. And again, that's also a proof text against for how to handle these situations. And again, he committed murder. So he committed murder against the heir to David's throne at that time, because Amnon was like the heir apparent. If you had to rank David's children, he kills the presumed heir.
Heir presumptive.
Yes. Because Absalom, I think, is the third child. Amnon was either the first or second, and then the other child was just never named again in the scriptures.
I'm currently reading First Samuel, so it's like I'm reading about Saul's reign, and I think Saul is actually a pretty lazy king.
And again, another John MacArthur insight, because I think his notes had that's the birth order.
Oh, okay.
So that plays a huge role later on in the story. If you ever wonder why did David do the things that he did, or why did he not react as much as he did to certain situations? And yeah, there's a huge political dynamic when you have the fact that your assumed successor, violates your or your other daughter, and then you're like third in line for your third heir, your third born son kills the firstborn son or second born son, but the presumed heir. So yeah, it's a huge dynamic, and yeah, John MacArthur helped me out on that.
It's also awkward when your uncle kills one of your generals or whatever when you try to demote him. But yeah, it's a pretty exciting book of scripture for sure. I don't think Amazon's going to do it justice in their adaptation, but I've already done that video. So I think we're anything else to say on the Basham controversy? Because yeah, I don't see a difference between Chip and Joanna Gaines affirming homosexuality and Andrew Claven doing it. And I think because both of these people claim Christ, Christians should have nothing to do with them.
I mean, again, would we have the same standard for Nick Fuentes, who allegedly is a homosexual and or a federal agent? Like, would we say, yeah, he's brilliant and kind? Like, no, we wouldn't say that. We wouldn't say that about Andrew Tate either.
No, I do commend his restraint and not like busting a cap in the person who was at his door trying to break into his house. Like,
I mean, that whole thing is so ridiculous, but kind of funny. But
it is funny, but
yeah, I mean, yeah, we don't necessarily go around endorsing his character or his work. And again, if I need another reason other than his degeneracy on the side, like, that's ridiculous. And again, no Christian before like World War II would have actually thought these things. We are so far down the slippery slope of compromise that we should not be endorsing their characters. We really shouldn't. I mean, again, when we talk about what is or is not friendship, we really shouldn't be friends with this.
Yeah, it's ironic because Donald Trump commits adultery several years before he ran for president, and yet he's the bad character as opposed to the politicians that are like. I don't know how you say Donald Trump's character is, say, worse than John McCain's or Mitt Romney's or Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden's or Kamala Harris's. So it's kind of interesting that, Donald Trump committed adultery decades ago, but that was such a stain on his character that Big Eva latched onto against people who had way worse character flaws currently. But it's like homosexuality is not such a stain on someone's character that, we're seeing that become less of a stain on someone's character in the eyes of many, even in Big Eva. Even, in this case, Megan Basham did that.
And yeah, Basham wants to criticize like mean words and harsh language and like, you can't just go around being mean to people. No, that actually is what changed the culture. It was not, oh, we debated the issue and we won the hearts and minds. No, it was just like, this is disgusting. And these people are disgusting. You don't want.
Well, you had instances like the Zulaks down in Georgia. That was a famous case, and I think there's going to be many such cases like that.
Yeah, as people see what exactly that lifestyle entails, they get disgusted by it, and favorability towards it goes away. Right. And guess what? Their response in Hollywood when they saw like the 80, like I forget who it was. He was talking about how. The normal gay dude was like a trope on Hollywood of having these upstanding gay men as like essentially Trojan horses for the gay movement. And basically, yeah, that's when you're defending the character of Spencer Claven, you're basically defending a Trojan horse.
Right, and I think it's only a matter of time before he does the whole Dave Rubin, Guy Benson, Pete Buttigieg thing.
Would he still be brilliant and kind if he did that?
Yeah. And even Steve Dace kind of defended Dave Rubin a little bit.
Yes.
Because that guy is literally only in conservative ink because of, tokenism and first mover advantage, tokenism, plus he lied about the left leaving him. Like, that's always a lie when someone says that. No, you either saw the consequences of your belief system and wanted off the ride because you cried and wanted off the ride, like, you were scared of a roller coaster or something. Or you're just lying and trying to infiltrate because that's where the money is, James Lindsay.
And let me just say, like, how does defending his character and work to actually help evangelize him? How is he being evangelized closer to God? It seems like he's dug his heels in, and you're talking about some hard soil.
No, because if you're having someone that that is being affirmed in their sin, by Andrew Claven, it's not going to be like the situation in Corinthians with the Corinthians where the person who was thrown out for, by
fornicating with their
Paul,
stepmother.
then also, I think, came back. So let's do last call for questions. I did see this one question come up. How about Paul Washer as in terms of a successor to John MacArthur? I don't
Maybe
think
not.
Paul Washer I don't think he has the medium delivery of his message to be that guy.
I
I
have
think,
nothing against him. I
yeah,
don't
it's nothing
I don't
against him.
quite know him that well, honestly.
Yeah, that's also the other thing. Like, I've written very few articles, if any, on Paul Washer, and I think it's not a thing on his on his character, but it does show, like, is he stepping out into the fight in super unique ways, or is he doing his own thing, each and every week? But I don't think he's going to step up to MacArthur's level of, just being a leader in a movement, because I don't think he's close to being that level of leader right now.
Yeah, I just don't know
And
him.
that's not a diss on his preaching or anything like that. But as far as being a more than just a preacher, but like someone who's more of a leader, commander of, armies of Christians and stuff like that. Because, I do believe in hierarchy. I don't believe we should erect popes where, we fall on the sword of every bit of teaching and not be, we're not cult followers here. We don't build a cult here, which some people might have done with John MacArthur. And actually, this is kind of a sad thing that I wanted to bring up earlier in the stream. Like, Grace Community Church has announced, like, declining giving, like, things are, they kind of announced that they are kind of scaling back operations a little bit, which I think is really sad. And I don't think John MacArthur, would want people to just leave after he's gone. Like, but I feel like there's gonna be a noticeable amount of people in GC's in Grace Community Church that leave because they were just there for MacArthur. I feel like, and the decline in donations that they announced a month or so ago is evidence of that. So, yeah, I think Stormy Squad has a good analogy. Like, MacArthur was a literal quarterback. So, yeah. And Washer was not a quarterback, if that makes sense. For this football analogy, I think that's a very good way to put it. So, yeah, that was a very good question though, because that name also should have come up. But again, I've not written that much on Paul Washer. So, all right. I'll give it another second as more questions come in. But if you like this kind of content, do also subscribe to the channel, to the podcast, if you are new. And we have extra content for those who are subscribers. Going to try and do more of that. But anyway, not seeing anything come in, so I'll just end it right here. So my name is Reyes Anthony. It's the Evangelical Dark Web. If you like this content, like I said, subscribe, channel, podcast if you're new. Have a blessed day. Stay based. Christ is King. And we will catch you on the next one.